I messed that up. There was one more button to click, so give me 1 second.
That's funny.
Are we on mute?
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We will start momentarily. If you'll just be patient, give us a few minutes. Thank you. Everyone, thank you for joining us. We will start momentarily. We just want to give a couple more minutes to make sure the major number of our attendees can hear the presentation from the beginning. You'll just be patient. Thank you. All right, everyone. It is 6:05 p.m. and we're going to go ahead and get this started. Want to be respectful of everyone's time. I am Rosalind Dickerson Cleaver, Airport Relationship Manager for the Department of Aviation. If you need to communicate with us, please use the chat for any assistance or any questions that you may have during the presentation. Again, thank you for joining us. And tonight we will be hearing from Mark Diebner, Director of the Department of Aviation. He will be covering the status of projects at Dallas Love Field.
Okay, Rosalind, sorry about that. I thought, Chris, why don't you advance slides? Welcome, everybody, to our first Good Neighbor Plan meeting of 2022. Glad you could all take a little bit of your time this evening. We can share with you what's going on at the airport, get some feedback. We do have some questions that we received prior to the meeting, and Rachel, I'll hand it over to Rachel Simpson a little bit later, and she'll go through those. We had planned, we were hoping to be back in person, or at least a hybrid of some virtual, some in person. But given the rapid advance of the latest variant of COVID, I know we'd all prefer not to be in virtual on these types of meetings. I agree that it's not the best way to exchange. However, we, out of an abundance of caution, we decided to move this meeting virtually. But as always, we've got contact information at the end of the presentation. You can reach out to us individually. And as Rosalind said, you can go in the chat for this live event. All right, let's jump into it. Next slide, please. We'll give you just a kind of a program overview. Those of you that might be new to the Good Neighbor Plan and these series or cadence of meetings we like to have, I'll run through our various projects we've got going on. I'm sure everyone's seen a lot of activity around the airport. It's very visible from outside the perimeter and kind of let you know what's going on. We do have some environmental updates and just a few community engagement things we've been involved in. As always, we strive to be a good neighbor and want to be involved in community activities in and around the airport. And even with the COVID protocols, we're doing our best to stay engaged with all of our stakeholders. Next slide. All right. So Good Neighbor Plan, if you're not familiar with it, we started as a kind of an outgrowth of our master plan we did in 2015. It was really to help us at the city guide the development in and around the airport, make sure it's consistent with what you, the owners of the airport, would like to see. And there were some larger city goals of creating, throughout the city, livable, walkable neighborhoods, and we felt like the airport could do a better job than we had in the past. And so we began the Good Neighbor program as a way to engage regularly with all of our neighbors and make sure we're doing everything we can. Next slide. Our goals kind of set out at the very beginning in the series of meetings we held, really focused on the aesthetics and the sort of physical interaction of the airport and the neighborhoods around it. As I quote there, our goal is to be a community that happens to be located around an airport. So we know we need to be part of that. I think the airport for a lot of years was really just focused on aircraft and aeronautical activities within the fence. And we really feel like we've come a long way from where we were back in 2011 when I first got to the airport. Early those series of meetings, we heard a lot from all of the stakeholder groups that we needed to improve the off-airport urban design, make sure that We were really integrating with everything that was going on around us. A lot has happened in the past 10 years, both to the city as well as to the airport. We've really been focusing on improving our landscaping and beautification of the airport for those that travel around it. And we've been on a steady march to increase and improve the parks, trails, and recreational activities around the airport, and especially on airport property where we have a direct hand in how that property is managed. You'll see a little bit later, we've really been working on our signage and traffic as well as pedestrian improvements. And recently the Dallas City Council was briefed on our Vision Zero, which is the goal of attaining zero vehicular deaths in the city. And that's both accidents between vehicles as well as vehicle and pedestrian or vehicle and cyclist collisions. We're not necessarily in one of the hot spots or in the corridors where there have been a significant amount of accidents, but we know as we improve the airport, improving those pedestrian and vehicle interactions in every way we can will help the city overall reach that goal of zero fatalities due to vehicular movement. Next slide. We broke our target areas. If you new to the program, we've in early on we held very focused meetings, recognizing that although we're not a huge airport, there is a different character on different sides of the airport. The Lemon Avenue side with Bluff View, Cochran Chapel, deep Elm Thicket, and that's a little bit different than say the West Left Field neighborhood, which is different than our interactions with Bachman Lake and the park, and then the commercial corridor on Mockingbird Lane. We've since collapsed that. We haven't held in a couple of years those individual kind of target area meetings, and we may want to revisit that, kind of revise the plan now that we're getting close to about 6 years since we originally did those series of meetings with both residential and business owners to receive feedback on the plan. Typically, a master plan should be refreshed, somewhere 7 to 10 years, kind of check in on progress and make sure all those priorities are still the same. I will say that the neighborhoods are changing around Love Field. We've seen a lot of development, a lot of infill, a lot of new multifamily, especially to the west and south of the airport. So we're probably approaching a time when we'll go back out and have another series of focused meetings on each of those neighborhood areas. Next slide. All right, real estate updates. The first thing, if you've driven on Lemon, you probably have noticed the steel is being erected for the new hangar development for Business Jet Center. They already have several hangars on that northeast corner of the airport. This will add to their campus. We put out a request for proposal for available land at Love Field a couple of years ago. Business Jet Center was actually the selected proposer. They're building another 40,000 square foot of hangar space and additional office space. And they will be operating their fixed base operator. And you can see from that slide that was made available when we closed runway 1836, which was our north-south runway. And you can kind of see that little island of pavement there with the dark squares and trapezoids on it. That is what's left over that runway. That runway was antiquated, was too short, had no runway safety area. So we made the decision to close that runway several years ago. Likewise, on the other end, next slide, Chris, on the south end of that runway, the land is being developed for children's health. Right now, they are operating out of a hangar on the east side. So this will be a really premium facility for them. Actually will shorten the response time and travel time for their medical evac aircraft. There'll also be some office space and some ambulance parking, and that'll be off of you can kind of see Denton Drive on the top. So we're kind of excited about that. That'll be a really nice facility for them and really help their mission of the emergency medical air transport. Next slide. Infrastructure, give you update. Our entry road project continues. That'll really make that entryway into Love Field a lot more pleasant. A lot of improvements there to that intersection, which currently has no crosswalk. We've been steadily connecting the pedestrian access around the front of the airport. This kind of will link those two efforts on the east and west. If you haven't driven down Mockingbird by the entrance, you'll be very surprised when we get it all done how different everything's going to look. The other goal was to improve the lighting. We receive a lot of complaints about the bollard lighting we've had for a number of years. It's really inadequate. It's very distracting to the folks coming in and out of the airport. We think overall it'll improve the traffic flows and certainly the aesthetics, and we're very excited. Next slide here, we have some photos of our new art piece, the Mockingbird, which has been installed. It will be lighted. We're waiting for the street lighting to be installed to connect all the electrical, but the public art piece that we had commissioned there for the entrance not only is dramatic in the daytime, but when we get it lit up, it'll be very dramatic in the evening as well. The pedestrian improvements also go all the way up to the terminal. So I know it doesn't seem like we would need a way to walk to the terminal, but you do see folks walking on Herb Kelleher Drive now, not frequently, but it really is an inhospitable path. And of course, we'll be finishing with the retaining wall. We'll be finishing the fencing project. We've been on a steady march over the past 5 years to replace all of our chain link and barbed wire fencing. We're federally required to have security fencing, but we really have, if you've been watching us over the years, steadily been replacing that sort of unsightly chain link and barbed wire with a much more pleasant wrought iron looking security fence. We think makes a big difference. You can see the big granite stone that was the entry marker has been removed, and we'll have some new signage there. So we're pretty excited about this project. Next slide. We continue to work on our Lemon Avenue Streetscape project. We've had some separate public input meetings, and we really think that's going to make a big difference along Lemon with enhanced landscaping, urban design elements, and some gateway features to the various neighborhoods. A much improved pedestrian pathway for cycling and walking. It'll connect from airport property essentially all the way to Bachman Trail, which goes around the lake. So we're going to continue on that. We've improved street lighting. The first sort of element, we worked with Dallas County, who funded the project of the Bluffview Lemon intersection. If you've been through there lately, you can see that that's been completely redesigned. It's much safer for the turn lanes and the merging lanes, and a much improved crosswalk for those folks on the east side who want to cross Lemon Avenue. We are going to be working with, I think next slide, Chris, we got a number of partners on that project, including DART, and one of the things we're going to be focused on is better bus shelters. Like I said, a 10-foot shared use trail, and we'll continue to work on this project. I think we're a little behind on the design. We've had some hiccups with the abutting property owners, trying to make sure that we don't impact their businesses. Some of that property was airport property that was leased to the abutting business owners, so we've been working through those sort of real estate aspects of that project. But we're really excited. It's going to add a significant amount of mileage to the park system once we connect with Bachman. The other update is the county's been doing a lot of mobility improvements, and they've got a project that I think is kicking off this year. I should have checked before the meeting with some bike lanes on, or mobility improvements, I should say, on Lovers. So that should be a good way for those adjoining neighborhoods to have good access, safe passage down Lemon, which really you can't do now since there are no sidewalks on the east side, and the west side airport side is really hasn't got any kind of connecting sidewalks either. So we feel like we're making a lot of progress on this as well. Next slide. On to the runway. We continue to face some challenges. We originally had hoped to have the runway reopen for operations. The overall project, as you can see from that slide, the runway's in yellow. We're making a number of taxiway improvements in blue and kind of the aqua, and then the connectors in green. The aqua portion of the project, phase 1, which was Taxiway Charlie, that's been complete and opened. The blue part is Taxiway Tango. That's substantially complete. And we've got some pictures here to show that we've begun the demo of the existing runway and begun with repaving. We had hoped to be done by the end of February. That is not going to happen. The latest schedule update that we've agreed to, additional days. There have been a number of challenges. Some wet weather when we kicked the project off. We've had some unforeseen conditions, and then supply chain issues continue to plague all of the construction industry with, as you can imagine, the large quantities we need for the amount of pavement. That runway is 8,800 feet long. The concrete, it's a layered, kind of a layer cake of base before they do the actual 18-inch thick paving as the top layer. So it's a little more than just pouring a road or a sidewalk, given the heavy loads that it takes, and it's just requires a lot of concrete, a lot of manpower to get that concrete placed. So we're working with our contractor, trying to keep them on track as best we can to have that reopened. Right now, the schedule takes them through April. And hopefully there may be it may extend a little beyond that, given the continued issues with supply chain problems that they're having getting material, and that may push out. We haven't yet agreed on a extension of that schedule yet, but as soon as we do, we'll make sure we let everyone know. And if you're not signed up, make sure you're on our email list. We send out updates on various projects via email and a monthly newsletter, as well as our environmental weekly updates and those Love Field Environmental Advisory Committee meetings, and those happen quarterly. Next slide. As you know, with that reconstruction, all of our traffic is on the Lemon Avenue runway. We're overall projects almost halfway done, and so we're continuing to work with them, and we hope to get that runway open here shortly. Next slide. I kind of jumped ahead and talked about that slide. Here's some bird's eye view of kind of the work that's being done. You can see the new pavement going in place. The figure 1 is looking south. Over Bachman, you can see the new pavement there for Tango and a chunk of the runway, and then the other one is, of course, looking north. You can see the demo of the old runway is almost complete, and then the new Taxiway Charlie, that new gray pavement there. Next slide. Just a few more views, kind of the same thing, showing the taxiway, and then the runway demo, the kind of the brown dirt there in figure 4, and as they steadily chew up that runway and prepare the base for the new concrete. Next slide. Just some shots of sort of the size. You know, our runway is 150 feet wide. Like I said, the concrete is actually poured to a depth of 18 inches. So we're continuing to work on that. Next slide. The Crossfield Taxiway project, we are currently in design of that. I think the next slide is a better slide, kind of give you a sense of kind of the way it looks now. So figure 2 is the existing, and then figure 1 is what it'll look like. As you can see, it really improves the airport operations, safety, allows the aircraft to move pretty efficiently between the 2 runways and from the terminal. This will really clean up all of that leftover. That's the old runway, from the original airport that was built, the 1836, and then all the little connectors, which require a lot of work, a lot of maintenance, as well as difficulty in pilots navigating the airfield. This really cleans everything up. We will be building a new aircraft rescue and firefighting station. You can kind of see in figure 2, the lower left-hand corner, it's kind of a red dot there. There's a white building, and then the small building next to it is our aircraft rescue and firefighting facility. It's very old. It's built in I want to say it was built in the 60s. It's kind of antiquated design. It's not very very pleasant for the firefighters that work there. And then with the new taxiway, Crossfield Taxiways, it actually leaving that station there we won't be able to meet what's called index, which is essentially the travel time they have to get to the ends of the runways within 3 minutes from the first alarm. So we'll be repositioning that new ARF station close to the Crossfield Taxiways, which will give them really good access and overall improve the safety of the ARF program at the airport. Next slide. Alternate entry, we can kind of rattle through this. We've talked about this project for over a year. We continue, well, with the pandemic and the drop in traffic, we certainly haven't, we had a breather in 2020. However, the traffic has come back to the airport. I think in July of last year, we were at about 94% of where we were pre-pandemic. Likewise, November and December were both in the low 90% of traffic compared to pre-pandemic. And so those traffic, when assuming the pandemic comes to a close, the traffic will return. We do have a very low level of service, especially at peak periods, getting in and out of the airport. We continue to see a single entry into the roadway as a operational risk, security risk. And so in way back in the master plan update we did in 2018, it called for an alternate entry one way or another. Next slide. So for those of you who haven't been watching this project, we had identified essentially 11 possibilities where we could provide an alternate entry, some off of Mockingbird, some off of Lemon, a couple off Shorecrest, one connecting Northwest Highway, one connecting to Denton. Next slide. We went through our normal process of engineering, seeing which ones would affect traffic impacts the most, essentially which would reduce the total vehicle miles traveled around the airport. One issue as we went through the process and we briefed council, they wanted to make sure that we developed an ability to accommodate a people mover system to connect to DART. And so through that analysis, the next slide, Chris, will show sort of eliminated several of them because they didn't meet the criteria, really didn't improve traffic, nor had a people mover option. And so we narrowed it down to these 5 options, with the 6th being, of course, do nothing. Through that process, it became apparent when we were talking about the traffic, you can go to the next slide, Chris, that traffic around Love Field and in and out of Love Field was not, couldn't be looked at sort of on its own. And so the city, because a number of issues were going around the airport, not just our alternate entry, the city requested the North Central Texas Council of Governments to do a planning study. They agreed, funded the study with roughly $1 million budget. They kind of mapped out the area outlined in red, which was meant to look at all the traffic flows in this area and projects that COG was working on, city was working on, the alternate entry, just all of the traffic data that they have. And they are really the keeper of all the traffic models that take us out to 2045, which is really how they do traffic roadway planning. And so we've been working with them, providing them information. They've run a number of scenarios. They've had a couple of public meetings that we've attended, and they're continuing to get feedback through their normal process of traffic improvements. There are a lot of things that they would like to see remedied in this area, with Love Field being one of those, and the traffic loads and congestion on Mockingbird. But they've got, I guess, the bigger fish to fry with traffic and issues on Northwest Highway, pedestrian improvements on Northwest Highway. So they're looking at sort of a comprehensive view of all the traffic movements in the area. So next slide. Right now, we've seen some preliminary analysis that they've done, both in the public meetings that they've held, and then what they've just so far shared with us. It's our understanding that the Council of Governments will present their findings and recommendations that have come out of this planning study to Council. So we are waiting for that to see what their recommendation is for alternate entry, what the impacts would be to the changes they would sort of recommend for all the other roadways, Northwest Highway being one of them, Shorecrest, those kind of things, and then where we fit into that overall plan. So we are awaiting them to finalize that and bring it back to the council. After that, once we know the direction that they're recommending, we'd be able to do a little more work on that short list. It's my sense that they will essentially rule out a couple of the options as not practical or plausible, or don't yield benefit. And that'll kind of help us narrow down ultimately a recommendation for an alternate entry to City Council, and then seek approval from them to begin sort of preliminary design and environmental analysis of the option that we recommend. So still got a long way to go. You know, everything we do at the airport, we're a federally funded facility, so we have to comply with the NEPA, National Environmental Protection Act, and we have a whole process of going through an environmental impact study for any changes we're going to make to the airport. So we'll continue on that pathway. Like I said, it still have a ways to go on getting that project ready to even award for design. So next slide, Chris. Environmental updates. You know, just a reminder, we do have voluntary noise program. We continue to do what we can to affect the traffic in and out of the airport, bearing in mind that we have no direct control of the activity that is under the purview of the FAA. So we're doing the best that we can. We do employ noise monitors, which give us real-time data, as well as we sort of go above and beyond most airports. We update our noise impact contours, which essentially take all of the data, flight data from the previous year, to establish the noise contours, which show the various levels of average sound around the airport, what they call a DNL contour, day-night average. Next slide. Excuse me. Overall, our operations, probably the biggest effect on noise complaints is not only the number of operations, but also the time of day. We continue to see, heavy general aviation use, which is all the private jets. One of the benefits, but challenges of being an airport that is close to high-income areas of the city is we have a very robust general aviation or private aircraft activity at our airport. Most commercial airports that have a lot of flights don't see anywhere near the level of GA. They tend to stay at general aviation airports like our other airport in our system, Dallas Executive. And so they contribute pretty significantly to the total operations we have, as you can see. We're down slightly October, November, usually pretty strong months. December, I think with the rise of Omicron, is presented several challenges with flight crews. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. But overall, the GA hasn't seen the drop off that we've seen in our air carrier operations, partly because of lighter activity, less bookings, but also because of the challenges with the number of flights that the airlines are operating, both from flight crews as well as, and this is just a weather disruption time of year. And since the Wright Amendment expiration, we are impacted more significantly by weather throughout the country than we used to be. So we do see a number of flight cancellations due to bad weather elsewhere in the country. So next slide. Just like to show you one of the, when we bought the Casper system, which not only has a flight tracker, which is accessible by the public, it also gives us sort of these density maps, which are you can select a period of time and it'll show all the flight tracks of the aircraft. This is pretty broad view, kind of. This is how the FAA directs traffic in. If you tighten in around Love Field, you can see that once we move to an RNAV system rather than radar-based departure procedures, it really has tightened up the flight tracks coming off of Love Field, and we've seen that pretty beneficial. But you can tell here since October and December, we've had zero activity on our other runway, which everything is going off of the single runway while we'll be under construction. So, but it's just a nice feature to look at. Next slide. Total operations complaints. We track all of the complaints. We've seen a drop off. Steady operations, little bit of growth. Like I said, December was a little slower. Typically, January, February will be our slowest months. It's not until spring break kicks in. But overall, we are continuing to track our complaints, investigating what we can largely, try to see if there's anything unusual in most of those complaints. Since we don't have the Denton Avenue runway, we of course don't have a preferential runway program. So I think neighbors on the east are, seeing a lot of the later night activity, which, is a little different than before, but we try to let everybody know that we would keep that runway closure as brief as we could, understanding the impact of noise on the east side, it all being pushed over there. Next slide. Flight tracker, if you don't know, if you go to our website, or we have the we have a link to this, but you can see the URL right there at the bottom, flighttracker.casper.aereo/Dell. That'll show you real-time flights. It'll also show you flight numbers. The one thing I will caution you on, and we do get complaints about this, you will not see any military flights. So we've had some folks express concern. They hear a loud aircraft, and military planes are generally pretty loud. They'll go on to flight tracker and they won't see a flight, and they'll suspect that the flight tracker is not working. It's no, that radar data is not available to us or to anyone. But this will track all of your commercial flights, GA flights, kind of where they are with tail numbers on most of those aircraft. And in that, we also have the complaint system. There's a number of ways you can submit any complaints or issues to our noise coordinator, noise manager, Isaac, via email. You can call our 214-670-LOVE, which is our airport operations center, and they can forward complaints over the phone. And then lastly, you can lodge a complaint in the flight tracker. So next slide. Airline activities, kind of brushed on it, but our schedule was pretty strong. Southwest pre-pandemic was running about 195 daily flights, with Delta operating 5 and Alaska operating 9. Delta's not consistently doing 5 a day. Southwest is currently down around 150 scheduled flights. The original plan that we knew was next spring they were going to go back up, or they publish 195, but then they sort of cancel them in advance. I don't really understand why they do it that way, but Southwest had indicated to us that they had hoped to get back from a high of where they were during the holiday season, which was about 178 daily flights. They had hoped to get all the way back to their 195 or so daily flights starting next spring. However, last week we got notice that they are revising that schedule back down for next spring due to their continued issues with crew availability throughout their system. And it's not just Love Field. They're reducing their schedule like 9% system wide, just because they're having so many cancellations, which actually causes more problems than just not having that flight on the schedule. So they're drawing that schedule back down for spring. I think they hope the pandemic will be over and they'd like to be back to their full flight schedule by summer. But everything is kind of up in the air right now, pardon the pun, until they really get a sense of, will the latest variant run its course? Will there be another one behind this one? And how's that going to affect crew availability and supply chain and those kind of things? So we'll continue to monitor that and respond, managing the flight activity as best we can. Next slide. Just a few community engagement updates. We had a blood drive we held at the airport. We got not only aviation employees, but also our tenants and airlines trying to help out the critical blood shortage that American Red Cross is having right now. If you have a chance, it's my understanding we continue to have that. So if you get a chance, please consider donating. Next slide. We also continue to be engaged with the school system. With the ISD, we did some of their virtual career days. We had hoped we would work with them on their STEM program, and gosh, I'm thinking of the other program that they were going to advance they put on hold, which is really interesting sort of strategy, more of a career path for trades like aviation, like construction, rather than just having the high school experience be a anticipation that everyone graduates high school is going to go to college. So we were pretty excited about that. We had several meetings with them, and a large group of industry folks from the other industries that they wanted to focus on, and so we're kind of waiting for that to continue. I will say that last year I had the opportunity to participate in Principal for a Day, which was a pretty interesting and fun time to be principal for a day. So that was a really great program that DISD has been putting on. Next slide. I think we're kind of here at the end. And like I said, here's the updates. Rachel is going to jump on here in a minute, but let me, in the kind of Q&A, a couple comments came in. Let me just address those pretty quick. So one question, can you expand on what the noise impact will be with the opening of the renovated runway? When can we expect some relief from the noise? We would anticipate that we would go back to normal, which is a roughly 50-50 distribution of flights on both runways. That is our expectation. The preferential runway program, which urges pilots, we can't dictate, but urges pilots to use the Denton Avenue runway from the hours of 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. Once that runway is reopened, and that program, we can continue to have folks participate in that. But overall, the new runway, once it's open, we would expect to be back to sort of the regular level of activity we would. I don't anticipate, the runway is not going to be that much better that it's going to draw folks. Sort of the usage of the runway is more about geography and ease of taxi than it is about condition of the pavement. So we would expect that, and hopefully the runway will be reopened before the summer travel season. That's what we're hoping for. And then there was a comment, when can we start planning for general aviation to move to Dallas Executive? Unfortunately, there's not a way for us to do that. We have 7 fixed-based operators. We are, like I said, a federally mandated facility. We have to be open to all those that want to use us 24 hours a day. We continue to improve Dallas Executive. We've seen a significant increase in operations there. The best we can do is continue to make Dallas Executive as good a general aviation airport as we can. We have been working with a marketing team, which has developed a marketing program to try and lure more folks to Dallas Executive. Hopefully some maybe from Love Field. However, I think the demand for hangar space is so strong at Love Field, even if we move some folks from Love to Dallas Executive, and we made major improvements there with the runway, and we're adding some taxiway on the west side. There's so much demand to come to Love Field that we're going to be a busy general aviation airport for the foreseeable future. So there really isn't much we can do about moving them unless they want to move. What's the plan to redo the runway? Well, I think we need to get, once we get the Denton Avenue runway open, we will be doing a pavement evaluation on the Lemon Avenue runway. at some point in the future, probably within 5 years, we're going to have to take a serious look at improving at least parts of that runway. The good news is 1-3 left, or the Lemon Avenue runway isn't constructed the same way that the Denton Avenue runway was. And so if we do have to make improvements to that runway, I don't foresee us necessarily doing a full length reconstruction like we did on the Denton side. But there would be probably some major work, especially in the landing zones, that'll need to be done. And that'll, we've closed Lemon Avenue runway before. It's just the nature of being a 2-runway airport. There'll be periods when we're down to a single runway. What are peak periods of traffic? Our heaviest period is the 8 a.m. to 11 and the 2 p.m., maybe a little later than that, 2:30, I think, I'm trying to remember, 2:30 to say 7, kind of those, not early morning, since we have several departures, but the GA traffic hasn't ramped up. It's usually kicks in around 8:30, and then we have a lull during the lunch hour, and then kind of crank back up late afternoon, early evening. And then will Lemon Avenue Streetscape feature shade trees? Yes, the landscaping will be designed to provide shade. We have to be sensitive about species of trees, make sure that we're not creating habitat for birds. We continue to have an issue with bird strikes at Love Field, and so we're doing all we can to mitigate those types of trees that would provide habitat, especially for the larger species of birds. Can we give more details of plans of Lover's Lane? I don't have those. We'll have to get back to you. We have folks on the call that work on our mobility stuff, and they will. Okay, I think we have your name, and we'll try and get back to you with kind of the schedule and what they're doing there. Why ask when the residents inside the airport are much closer to the runway? Shouldn't you encourage more industry? So that's an interesting issue. I think the preferential runway program was put in place many years ago as part of the noise mitigation measures. It's been in place. We are recently had a audit of our noise control program by the city auditors. We do need to make updates to that program. And one of the issues we will be talking about is the preferential runway program and the proximity of the West Love Field neighborhood to that runway. I think at the time it was put in place, there really wasn't any residential development other than West Love Field to the south of the airport, where most of the noise impact is. Really, things on the sides of the airport aren't as impacted as those on the north and south, basically on the approach and departure lanes. That has changed. The amount of residential development that's happened between Love Field and, say, Parkland, all along Denton, Maple, there's been a lot of residential that wasn't there when that program was put in place, and that's one of the issues we're going to bring up when we visit with the city council and update them on sort of sunsetting some things that are in the noise control program that we no longer can do because of federal law. Next question, do we have available funding? We don't. Our projects are funded as we identify the need. Since we don't know what those needs are, we haven't identified funding. We have a number of tools, both FAA grants, we get discretionary grants, we have our own capital fund, which is funded from excess revenues at the airport. We also get entitlement grants, and so we plan all of our capital activities 5 years out. And so as we identify the improvements that'll need to happen, then at the same time, we'll be looking at the funding source. Are there any plans for sidewalks along Lemon? Yes. And Denton, right now, no. We're still working with primarily with the stakeholders on Denton Drive to figure out how we might facilitate some pedestrian improvements on Denton. We don't have enough land. We have kind of the opposite situation we have on the Lemon Avenue side. And then the Green Line, which runs along Denton, Dart has a lot of right of way. We had a couple meetings with the neighborhood groups, with Dart, with our transportation department, talking about what we might be able to do as far as pedestrian improvements along Denton Drive. But right now, no immediate plans. Is there a plan to install an Emass either end of the runway? No, we have, once again, our sort of our space constraints, given how small of an airport we are. We really don't have the room to do an Emass system, and we have no plans to do one. If Denton Drive is not used for second entrance to the airport support conversion to buffer bike lanes, we would. I think that's one of the options on the table. Given that the volumes on Denton are not that heavy, it seems like a more complete street design with a protected bike lane and pedestrian path makes sense to us, but we're not in control of that road. We'll have to continue to work with our transportation department. And last, what are the plans of movement of car rental facility out of the airport to free up land for future development such hotel? Right now, we're engaging a consultant to look at whether or not building a consolidated rental car facility makes sense. We've done a lot of work on it, working with rental car companies, with the airlines. But I got to be honest, I'm not, because of space constraints, we would have to build a structure, which is essentially another garage. There's some question as to what's the future of car rental business and whether we want to make a, $250 million investment in a facility that might not be needed in the future. So there are a lot of kind of unanswered questions on that. So we are hiring a consultant to really answer the basic question. Does it make sense for us to continue to look at and consider a consolidated rental car facility or not? Do we get benefit from it as far as traffic? Really, is it worth it to it would benefit the rental car companies most assuredly, because their number one issue is storage. There's just not enough acreage available to them to store cars for their peak period of rentals. And so they're incurring a lot of expense on renting offsite locations. They're pricing the vehicles very high to suppress demand. And I know during sort of those peak travel periods, they won't even allow a single day rental. So they have a business problem. And so part of me kind of thinks it's their problem, and I'm spending time and energy trying to solve their problem for them. And so we really need to take a hard look at whether or not that's something we need to continue to work on. But we'll be doing that. Hope to have that consultant on board here in the next couple of months. Probably a 6-month effort, and by fall we should have the results of kind of, long range. Is it worth it to move the rental car companies into a consolidated facility? I agree with you that it does create additional land for development, and so that's a benefit we would see. But is that benefit really worth it at the end of the day? So it's kind of where we are with that. Promise meeting, good way to expand good neighbor improvements. Yes, like I said, we we've been working with the West Love Field Neighborhood Association. We're planning on kicking off this spring. I think they had several things they were working on last fall, and so they asked us to just kind of hold off on our vision, kind of a visioning for Denton Drive. And what are the chances we get expanded gates at Love Field? There are no chances. The Love Field, the Right Amendment Reform Act has capped the number of gates at Love Field at 20, and it will literally take an act of Congress to change that law to allow additional gates at Love Field. So there are no additional gates coming to Love Field anytime soon. Okay, I'm going to jump. Rachel, you want to, I think, pick up from here, or Chris, we'll run through these.
Yes, sir, I will.
Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mark. We have
quite a few questions, so I'm gonna dive right in.
I'm gonna start with question number one. Request for live trees along Lemon Avenue. And the answer to that is the Department of Aviation is currently finalizing the Lemon Avenue Streetscape Enhancement Project. The project will include sidewalks, landscaping, bicycle trails, and lighting. Question number two. Love to learn about new running and walking trails as well as funding for how these areas will be maintained for the next 10+ years. I am highly against developing something that won't have a plan or budget to be maintained. The answer to that question. The presentation on the Lemon Avenue Streetscape Enhancements Project shows the depiction of walking trails to be developed along with bicycle paths and other life safety enhancements, such as lighting and intersection improvements. This project is being funded out of our capital budget. Once the project is complete, maintenance will be funded out of our operation and maintenance budget. Moving on to question three. Looking out for contracting opportunities with Dallas Love Field. The answer to that is for information about opportunities with the Department of Aviation in the city of Dallas. Ensure you register first as a vendor through the city vendors procurement portal bonfire at dallascityhall.com bonfire hub. The website lists all of the city's open solicitations. For more information, you can also contact the Office of Procurement Services Resource Link team at 214-670-3326 or visit the website at dallascityhall.com/department/procurement. And just to let you all know, these questions and answers will be posted on our website tomorrow. Moving on to question 4. Please explain the delays to runway construction, and is it true the other runway is scheduled for closure following completion of the current project? The answer is that reconstruction of runway 13 right -31 left on the west runway has been delayed as a result of supply chain issues and labor shortages, which are a result of COVID impacts. Runway 13 left -31 right has a life expectancy of another 10 years, but because of the increase in traffic on this runway, the design and reconstruction of it may have to start sooner. 13 left -31 right runway will be evaluated after traffic on both runways is re-established. Question 5. When will the runways both open up again? Runway 13 right -31 left is expected to be reopened by spring of 2022, but with the ongoing supply chain issues and labor shortages and COVID impacts, the reopening date may change. And there's a second part to question 5. Also, when they are both open, do they split traffic 50-50? I read somewhere the Lemon Avenue side is more for smaller planes, but I'm not sure if that is true. And the answer to your question is, runway usage is determined by the FAA Airport Traffic Control Tower. There are various conditions which determine runway use, including but not limited to weather, availability, and regional air traffic to all area airports. Safety of aircraft operations will always be the priority for air traffic control. Question number 6. I would like to understand what is happening to Shorecrest Road and its impacts on recreational areas. And the answer is the Lemon Avenue Streetscape Enhancements Project is only providing a trail from Lemon Avenue, to the intersection at Webb Chapel and Shorecrest on airport property. The remaining portion of Shorecrest Drive that is not airport property will be developed by a partnership project between the City of Dallas of Transportation and Dallas County under the county's MCIP program. Their plan is to widen Shorecrest Drive to 4 lanes with bike lanes. And last question. I'd like to know how small disadvantaged businesses in the low-income districts of Dallas can participate on contracts for the airport. For instance, I found out late about the customer service assessment for the airport, and it is in my core area. For information about opportunities with the Department of Aviation in the City of Dallas, please ensure you register as a vendor through the city's vendor procurement portal, Bonfire, at dallascityhall.bonfirehub.com/portal. The website lists all of the city's open solicitations. For more information, you can also contact the Office of Procurement Services Resource Link team at 214-670-3326 or visit their website at dallascityhall.com/department/procurement. Those are our questions that have been previously submitted. As of now, we have no new questions in the chat. And before we dismiss, I would like to ask Mark if you have any final comments.
No, I thank you, Rachel, for running through that, and we'll publish all this. We'll develop some written answers to the questions that are in the chat. I know I sort of tried to address them right now, so you didn't have to wait, but we'll get those written up and and added to the questions at the end. As always, my number is there on the screen, 214-670-6077. And you can call me or email me. I thought we had my email is not on here, but it's like all city emails. It's mark.diebner@dallascityhall.com. So, or you can contact any of the other folks through our website, through our Airport 670 Love number. We're always happy to hear from you. We appreciate everyone taking time today. I know virtual is not the best way to do it. I much prefer to be in person, but it is what it is, and we all need to just stick together and get through this. I don't have a better answer than that. Other than that, I really do thank everyone. Thanks to the staff. Oh, what I was going to say is if you have any vendor, if you want to be a vendor, Rosalind Dickerson, who you know is our community and tenant liaison manager, started with the city in the what we used to call the Resource Link team, helping businesses get hooked up with the city and sell products and services. So I imagine she hasn't forgot all she knows about getting you hooked up to be a vendor for the city. All right, well, thank you all so much. I don't see any other additional in the Q&A, so we really appreciate your time. If you have any additional comments, you want to reach out to us, please do so. And I hope you all have a very good evening. Thank you.